This is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City Tropical Update for December 30th around 10 a.m. I finally finished the update of the Hurricane City database to include the 2012 Atlantic hurricane season. You can click the database right above the tracking map, and that'll open up the Hurricane City database where you can choose your city or island out of a list of 153 locations to get the statistical breakdown of tropical storms and hurricanes affecting your area. So let's go ahead and take a look at the current feature at Hurricane City, which is Atlantic City, New Jersey, affected by Hurricane Sandy in 2012, and they're still recovering. It's going to be quite a while before they get back on their normal routine along the coast in New Jersey. But Atlantic City here has been updated to include the 2012 Atlantic hurricane season. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at the changes in the database using the Atlantic City feature here. And let's zoom in closer on Atlantic City and show you what we've done this year. For example, first of all, at Atlantic City, New Jersey, one of the more interesting features is the ability to figure out what time of year is the most likely time for a hurricane only. Now, we're not talking tropical storms, we're talking hurricanes, direct hits by hurricanes. The most likely time to be hit by a hurricane. Well, we've calculated for Atlantic City, New Jersey, and it comes out to September 13th, right at the exact height of the hurricane season is the most likely time to be affected up in and around Atlantic City, New Jersey. Now, if your area tends to get hit earlier in the season, you'd be more apt to be in this location over here. And if you're tend to get hit later, you'd be over to the right here. And the red box highlights the areas that are least likely, they're most likely to be affected by a hurricane. Now you ask, how do I possibly do this? Well, what I do is assign each day of the hurricane season a number. For example, June 1st would be number 1. And November 30th would be, I think it's like 106. I don't have the notes in front of me, but it's like 169th day of whatever the last day of the hurricane season is. And then based on the direct hurricane hits in history, for each location, you figure, okay, you've been hit by 12 hurricanes, and a couple of them are in August, and a couple of them are in October, and you assign the numbers to those specific hurricanes, and then you divide it by the amount of storms altogether that the area has been affected by, and that gives you the average day that this area should be affected, and it comes out to September 8th, I believe, is the day that Atlantic City is most likely to be hit, and that would put it in the 7 to 13 range. And then, of course, the next change in the database is the years within or near the core. Now, this used to be labeled as within 60 miles. And the problem is that recently, especially over the last 10 years or so, we've seen a humongous increase in the amount of really large hurricanes and tropical storms in the Atlantic Basin. Part of this is due to lower pressures in the Atlantic Basin that tends to create larger systems, but also with the talks of global warming over the years, one of the indications was that there would be an increase in the speed of the jet stream and also a larger than average areas of high pressure and low pressure, and that's what we're seeing in the Atlantic, much larger systems roaming in the Atlantic Basin. So I've gone back and recalculated using the HurTrack program and using the expanded wind fields of past and current hurricanes, and so we've decided rather than the 60-mile criteria to put it within or near the core. So if you're near the core, it would be considered a brush. If you're within the core, it's a direct hit from a hurricane or a tropical storm, so you can calculate those that way in each city. This is self-explanatory, names from the list above. Tropical storm to hurricane ratio, and this is one that I get a lot of questions on. And for example, the bar graph over here that says 100% for others and 0% for majors. Basically, it's simple, and it explains that all storms and hurricanes come out to 100% of the hits that take place in Atlantic City, New Jersey, with 0% majors because they've never been directly had the core of a major hurricane move through Atlantic City, New Jersey, so there's 0% on the majors. And, of course, the hurricane to tropical storm ratio has changed a little bit. They had a hurricane, so they went up from like 33% hurricanes to 34.8%. And the tropical storm dropped slightly from like 68% to 66.67. So it's about 2 to 1 tropical storms to hurricanes in the Atlantic City region. This one very rarely ever gets broken in this record here, and that's the longest gap between storms. And this is 11 years for Atlantic City, New Jersey. Just about every city in the Hurricane City database, 153 locations, none of them are anywhere near being close to breaking the record for the longest gap between storms because we've been so active lately. There's been a lot of storms out in the Atlantic, so a lot of these areas have been getting affected within their longest record-breaking times of not having storms hit them, and so that's another thing to keep. Now, this is the only real major change to Atlantic City for this year, and that is how often does the area get affected by a named storm. It lowered down to 3.2.8 years. It was around 3.62, I believe, in the last update. And this is, again, calculated using all the cities, basic same formula. Take all the years going back to 1871. How many times did an area get affected, brushed, or hit by a named storm? And then you divide it by the amount of named storms divided by 141 years, which goes back to 1871. That gives you 3.28 years. And direct hurricane hits is also changed due to Hurricane Sandy affecting the area. 11 hurricanes, it was 10. And so it's gone from 13.8 around to 12.8. So that lowers every time an area gets hit, but still quite a distance between hurricanes at 12.82. You take areas down in the tropics, South Florida and the Caribbean and areas like that, it's more like once every 4 or 5 years that a direct hurricane hit impacts an area. And the average miles per hour. Now, this hasn't really changed much at all because Hurricane Sandy hit with 90-mile-per-hour winds in Atlantic City, and the average was around, I believe it was around 85 miles an hour, so it might have increased 2 miles an hour due to the slight increase of Sandy being 90 miles an hour. It would take quite a few hurricanes with winds over 100 miles an hour to bump this up over 90 miles per hour on the average. Some of the areas in the deep tropics, the average wind speeds are around 110, 112 miles an hour, so it's much less up in the northeastern United States because systems are generally weakening when they hit the cooler waters in the North Atlantic. Statistically, when should this area be affected next? Well, it just got hit in 2012, so we don't calculate areas that are just affected for expanding it out. But if you take the average amount of years between storms, which is 3.28 years, and you figure they were hit in 2012, you just go out about 3 years, and that's when they should be affected next, around 2015 and 2016. Should be the next time that Atlantic City gets affected by a named storm, but that's not etched in stone. In fact, this year we saw 2 years in a row that Atlantic City was hit by a storm. We had Irene last year and Sandy this year, and that's very unusual. So you never know when your area is going to get hit. These are just statistical averages. And there's all the specifics on each storm. You can get all the interesting stats and model data and everything from each storm in history, at least the most recent ones anyway. In fact, there's documentaries and movies all on Sandy you can get information on, and the wind fields from the Hurricane Research Division, etc. The Hurricane Warning Show, which is archived from Hurricane Sandy. All that can be accessed in the database pages. So anyway, let's get back to the front page. One more mention I wanted to make is that I will be calculating the cities and islands most affected in the Atlantic Basin in the top 50, and that'll happen in 2013 in January. I'll calculate those and break it all down. So I'll be back in a couple weeks with another update on the rankings and see which cities and islands are most affected by named storms. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the database. Check it out. Search around for your city and island. And I always look forward to any feedback on this, jim@hurricanecity.com, with any questions or comments on the database. I'll be back in a couple of weeks with an update on the rankings. That's it for now. Thank you again for... Oh, one more thing. The tracking map is zoomed in on Atlantic City, New Jersey. You can take an aerial flight over the damage that happened right the day after by the USGS. They took pictures of the damage from Sandy. I mean, you can fly up and down the coast by just simply dragging your mouse like this. And notice it's before, and then when you let go of your mouse, it shows afterwards what the damage looked like. It's a really cool thing we have here using the GIS mapping at Hurricane City. Fly up and down the coast. We're going to leave it up for about another week, and then I'm going to pan it out to show the entire hurricane tracking map of the Atlantic Basin, because we'll watch for invests that pop up during the off-season to see if there's any development potential out there. So that'll only be up for about another week, so enjoy that while it's up. That's it for now. Thank you again.